Yeah, Paula is in, Rick, so we're fine. Yeah. Rick, I would much rather prefer you talk about yourself a little bit in the beginning, so I don't have to, do that.
Sure.
It's easier for you to do that and point out some of the highlights in your background. So, okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to get the session started. We have Professor Rick Vaz from WPI, Center for Project-Based Learning. They've been doing this for many, many years, and I will have him talk a little bit about himself before he gets talking about the project-based learning. Perhaps, Rick, on your panel, there's a little video camera. Can you click on that? Maybe people can just see you for a couple of minutes while you're introducing yourself. There you go. Fantastic. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so I'm very pleased that you can all join this webinar today. My name is Rick Vaz, and I'm in Worcester Polytechnic Institute. We are a private university, mostly focusing on engineering and science. We're located about 2.5 hours from New York City and about 1 hour from Boston in the northeast part of the United States. My university has featured a project-based curriculum for 46 years, and I have been on the faculty here for over 30 of those years. And just this year, we decided to launch a Center for Project-Based Learning, and the goal of this center is to help other colleges and universities around the world advance project-based learning on their own campuses. So we have worked in this short time with partners from the United States, from Russia, from India, from Thailand, from Saudi Arabia, and it's my hope that you will have a good experience in this webinar this morning and get some ideas of things that you can try yourself. So I'm going to turn off the camera right now so that the bandwidth use is limited, and we will begin talking.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Go ahead.
Okay. And I'm suddenly having trouble advancing the slides here, Krishna. I don't know why that is. It worked a moment ago. There. So today I want to first begin by defining what I mean by project-based learning and describing the goals of project-based learning, and also trying to convince you why project-based learning is a worthwhile approach to take with your students. I'm going to describe a project-based learning approach to an engineering education that we have been using here at WPI for many years. I'm going to share some data that we have collected from the graduates of our program about the long-term impacts of project-based learning for students in their lives and in their careers. And then I'm going to discuss some implications of this type of curriculum for institutions, benefits, but also changes that are necessary, and looking forward to answering your questions. So when I talk about project work, I'm talking about having students engage in authentic real-world problems, the type of problems that professionals solve, whether they are engineers or professionals from some other discipline. These real-world problems are almost always interdisciplinary, and so in some sense they are very messy. They are not simply an application of principles of mathematics and science, but they often involve human factors and social factors as well as technical factors. Typically, students are presented with a problem, and one of the most important steps in project-based learning is for students to choose a goal. They have to consider what it is possible for them to do, and then they have to figure out how they might achieve that goal. What are their research objectives, and what are the methods that they are going to be using? This typically requires them to apply and integrate knowledge from many different areas, certainly from the previous courses that they are taking. They have to apply their knowledge of mathematics and science and engineering, but also their knowledge of communities and society, and they may have to learn quite a bit while they're doing the project about something that is new to them. And finally, it's very important that the project work culminate in some useful results. So students are generating useful results and they are communicating them in various forms. One of the things that is very distinct about project-based learning is that much of the gain that students experience is in the form of what I will call transferable skills, because these are skills and abilities that they will develop that they can apply to other settings and other activities. These are skills like how to apply knowledge to solve problems in practical settings, how to understand the social aspects and human aspects of problems, how to learn about new topics very quickly by themselves, how to communicate effectively in written form, in oral form, using graphics and visuals, and how to work with other people, how to interact productively with other people. Now, project-based learning is one of a set of about 8 different high-impact practices that has been shown through quite a bit of research to increase student learning compared to traditional methods of teaching and learning. George Koo from the University of Indiana and his colleagues have done a great deal of research that have proven that for most students, doing some sort of high-impact practice where the students are engaged actively, and this can be project-based learning, community-based service, undergraduate research. There are many different forms that it can take, but these have been shown to increase student learning compared to the traditional method of sitting in a lecture and listening to the professor talk, the way that you are listening to me now. This is motivated not just by educational research, but also by the career aspirations of our students. A recent study done by the Hart Research Associates in 2015 of employers all across the United States revealed that the most important college learning outcomes for these employers are the following: the ability to communicate, the ability to work effectively with others, the ability to communicate in writing as well as orally, ethical judgment and decision-making, critical thinking and analytical reasoning, and the ability to apply knowledge and skills to real-world settings. These outcomes were ranked more highly by employers than any other outcomes, including the outcomes about knowledge in one's own discipline. In fact, 91% of employers in this study agreed that these 6 abilities are more important than the student's major area of study in order to achieve success in their careers. And this is increasingly important in a world where engineering students are finding jobs in many different industries and very often find that 10 or 15 years after college they're doing something that is not traditional engineering, but provides them with opportunities for leadership and success. Now, my university, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, is 150 years old. We were founded in 1865, and after about 100 years of offering a very traditional curriculum, the faculty in the year 1970 adopted a radically different approach to engineering education, which was project-based. It was emphasizing authentic problem solving, outcomes and abilities rather than simply passing courses. The students face a very flexible set of requirements so that we expect students to make a lot of decisions about what courses to take and what projects to pursue. And in doing so, we're putting a lot of responsibility on the students for their learning, so that the professor is not always having to do all the hard work. The students are having to go and teach themselves new topics and take a lot of responsibility for planning their education. And I think this is a very important point, because the type of project work we want them to do is typically done in teams. We try to create throughout this curriculum an emphasis on collaboration, not on competition. So we want students to work together, to help each other, So we do not have a grade point average. We do not have class rankings. We want them to consider their classmates to be people who are going to teach them and who they are going to teach as well. A lot of this project curriculum was motivated by the desire to educate engineers who are going to be socially responsible. The idea is to do things that are not simply interesting, but things that are important to society, to consider the impacts of technology on people, to understand other people and learn to work with them. And this requires quite a bit of emphasis in our curriculum beyond the major, so that students understand enough about the social sciences and the humanities so that they can respond appropriately to the human and social elements of the problems that they address. So this is what the project component of our curriculum looks like today. I'll go over this briefly and then I'll give some examples of these. In the first year, many of our students complete what we call the Great Problem Seminar, and I'll talk about that a little bit. This is a 6-credit-hour optional project experience that is interdisciplinary in the first year. In the second year, we expect all students to do a capstone in some area of the humanities and arts, which they have been studying to that point. We want them to choose a particular area. It might be philosophy, it might be a language, it might be literature, where they are going to do a deep study and then do some creative original work. From the second to fourth years of the curriculum, there are projects embedded in many of the courses, and I'll give an example from my own field of electrical engineering in that area. And then we come to the 2 big projects, that I will call them, that our students complete. In the third year, they do something we call the Interactive Qualifying Project. This is 9-credit-hour requirement, not related to the major. So it's interdisciplinary. It's something that might be called general education at another university. And I'll be giving some examples about this. And then in the fourth year, they do a project called the Major Qualifying Project. Again, this is 9 credit hours, or equivalent to 3 courses. And this is a capstone project in the major field. So this is typically where the engineering students are having a significant design experience. And again, I'll say a little bit more about that and give you some examples. So in this first year Great Problem Seminar, this was motivated by the idea of the grand challenges that the U.S. National Academy of Engineering has identified. And each one of these seminars, from which students can choose, focuses on one global problem. Here are some examples listed: energy, food, water, healthcare, climate change. Students choose a problem that they're interested in, and the seminar is taught by instructors from different disciplines. So we will typically have one instructor from either an area of engineering or science working together with one instructor from the social sciences or the humanities or the business world. And the idea is that students are learning about many different perspectives of the problem, not just the technical and scientific, but the economic, the cultural, the policy decisions. And as with the rest of these project-based examples, we're really focusing on skill development. We're trying to have these first-year students develop skills in research, in teamwork, in communication. During the first half of this course, the students learn about the big problem from a number of different perspectives. So if, for example, they are studying food, they will learn about the science behind nutrition. They will learn about the business behind agriculture. They will learn about the environmental consequences of agriculture. They will learn about some of the social issues associated with food and hunger. They'll do lots of assignments, both individually and in group, making some presentations and writing. And then in the second half of the course, this is when the project-based learning really begins. The students are divided into teams, 3 to 5 students per team, and each team of students has to select a particular project topic, a situated example of the big problem. So returning again to our example of food, the students may identify some community that they have learned about through the internet, some community in the world that is having a particular challenge associated with food. They may have a traditional crop which is being plagued by some disease, or it may be a place where agriculture is causing some environmental problems, and the students will learn about this problem, try to understand how these problems have been addressed in other parts of the world. They will work together to identify potential solutions. They will choose criteria and evaluate the potential solutions, and then they will recommend a particular approach. They produce a written report, but as you can see in the photograph on the slide, we also have them present their results. So this is what we do every year. Our first year students get together for a poster session. They make poster presentations to external judges. We bring in our alumni and people from local businesses to come and ask the students questions about their work and to judge the posters and choose some winners. It's a very wonderful opportunity for these students early in their career to do some original work and to get the opportunity to present it in a public forum, which is very motivating for them and causes them to do some of their best work. When we talk to the alumni who have completed this first-year project experience that we call Great Problem Seminar, we ask them about how did this Great Problem Seminar prepare you? And over 50% of the alumni said that the Great Problem Seminar prepared them much or very much for this list of activities. Now there are about 12 things here. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but you can see that these are the types of outcomes that I was referring to before as transferable skills. These are the types of outcomes that are going to help students in their careers and that can be transferred from one setting, such as studying food, to almost any other type of setting, because these are intellectual skills, these are collaborative skills, these are really the skills for success in the 21st century. I mentioned as well that in many of the courses across our curriculum, students are doing project work, and I want to describe a course which I have taught myself. This is an engineering design course for second-year electrical engineering students. This is a team-taught course. I would typically teach it with 2 other colleagues, and the students would be broken into teams of 3, and the faculty serve as managers to give the students a challenge to design something. Rather than thinking up the challenge entirely by ourselves, we very often work with external clients. So an example that I can give you is that we worked with an organization that was trying to develop an LED-based projector, light-emitting diode-based projector that could be used in an unelectrified area of Mali, battery-powered, using very low amounts of energy, to have classes at night to allow young women to learn to read so they can gain literacy. And this presented some particular cultural challenges to understand how this would be used and the need for very low energy and carefully recharging the batteries, but it also involved some tricky electronics because you need to come up with a very efficient way to drive the LED so that it doesn't drain the battery. The students are put into small teams, and we have some senior engineers, we call them. These are undergraduate students who have completed the course previously, and they assist the professors in managing these teams so that the professor does not have to check in with each one of these design teams on a regular basis. The senior engineers can check in on the teams to give them some advice, sometimes on the technical work and sometimes on their teamwork, and then report to me and my colleagues how things are going. This course is not heavy into the technical aspects of designing the circuits. The students are doing most of that work on their own. The course is focusing primarily on what is the process of design and what are the ideas of design, making sure that students understand that design involves understanding exactly what the user needs and determining user requirements, and from that deriving specifications, doing a lot of research into the prior art to determine what already exists, and doing market research to understand how your idea is something new and different from what already exists. The students had to deliver weekly design reviews, much the way the engineers in corporate setting would have to do, and they would deliver regular reports. And by the end of the course, they were expected to develop a working prototype and to demonstrate it to the professor. So in one of the versions of this course I taught with one other colleague, we had 18 teams of students, and they came up with 18 different designs. This is one of the things that is really interesting about this, is when you give students lots of flexibility, they come up with very creative ideas that are different from each other. We had 100% course retention rate, which means that of all of the students that began the course, every single one of them finished the course, which is actually pretty rare in our curriculum. None of them just decided to drop out. 76% of the students at the end of the course reported that they had spent over 20 hours per week working on this particular course. And this suggests to me that they were very highly engaged. 93% of them said that the course solidified their understanding of engineering. 96% agreed that they learned to apply their previous knowledge of engineering. And at the end, 20% of them volunteered to continue working on the design after the course was over, simply so that they could help the organization that we were working with. And this, to me, said quite a bit. It told me that the students had begun to be motivated by more than simply earning the grade or getting the credit for the course, but they were very excited about the fact that they were asked to do something that was real, that mattered to someone else. Now, I'm going to go on to talk about some of the higher level projects, the more extensive project work in our curriculum in a moment, but at this point, Krishna, maybe I can stop to see if there are any questions that people have.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Very exciting presentation so far, and I'm sure people have lots of thoughts and questions that they want to raise, but I think they've been so engrossed in listening to you, I haven't seen too many questions. Let me just check for a minute. I think many of them are just saying, hello, I'm here, kind of thing, but just send in the questions, everybody, okay, because we will take a little time to answer them. And also, if we don't have time to answer all your questions, I will be collecting a list of your questions, sending them to Professor Weiss later on, so that you can interact independently. One question just came up very quickly. Can you comment a little bit about forming teams and the challenges that you face in that situation?
We could have an entire webinar about the challenges of forming teams, but that is an excellent question, because I have found that it is good to do it in a careful way. Some faculty let students just choose to work with their friends, but I don't think that's a very good idea. I favor assigning students to teams either randomly or based on some information that you can gather that gives you a diversity of personalities and ideas and opinions on the team. There is a lot of research on teams suggesting that if you have some people who are all very similar and who get along and agree on everything, that they will not have a lot of creativity because they do not challenge each other's ideas, they do not see things necessarily differently. There are a lot of things that professors can do to help student teams succeed. Students don't always know how to work successfully in teams. Actually, faculty don't always either. It can help for a team to develop a team contract. So we would work with our teams in this course to develop a contract in which they agree. How much will they work? How often and at what hours will they get together? How will they communicate with each other? How will they resolve challenges? When work is due, how will they coordinate their efforts to integrate the work of each individual into a team product and edit it and make sure that it is done well? So there's really quite a lot to the teamwork. And I would refer you to the proceedings of the American Society of Engineering Education annual conference, where there is a lot of very interesting research being done by colleagues from all across the United States, but especially at Purdue University in Indiana, where they are doing a lot of research into how to most effectively form students into teams, support those teams, and also evaluate the students' work which is done in teams.
Now, a follow on to that is are the project group, does the students in the group remain the same throughout the years, or do they keep changing year to year?
We keep changing them year to year. We want the students to have many different teamwork experiences, and quite often, to be honest, students will learn the most from teamwork experiences which are not entirely pleasant. When the team has to deal with a difficult situation. A common difficult situation, of course, is when you have a partner who is not very motivated and doesn't want to do his or her work. But there are lots of different things that can happen in team settings, and if the professor can provide a little bit of support and guidance, it is possible for students to learn from each different team experience they have and gain teamwork skills so that by the time they are in their third or fourth year of the program and they have been in maybe 5 or 6 different teams, they're starting to get very good at communicating with their teammates, at cooperating, and at doing the most important thing in teamwork, of course, is not simply getting along, but generating good results.
What is the difference between project-based learning and problem-based learning?
That's another excellent question. These two terms are used sometimes interchangeably, but the general understanding is that project-based learning involves a more intensive learning experience than problem-based learning. Problem-based learning, very often the problem is simulating a real situation. In project-based learning, more often the students are actually doing something that is a bit more authentic. Project-based learning very often involves a more extensive engagement. So problem-based learning could take place in one classroom or in 1 week. A project might spread out over an entire semester. And whereas a problem-based learning, the students might simply be providing a solution and turning it into the professor to be evaluated. In project-based learning, good practice suggests that the students should have some sort of public reporting of their work, whether it is a poster presentation or an oral presentation or a report which is available on the web. I can provide some references to there's an organization in the United States called the Buck Institute for Education, and their website, BIE.org, has excellent resources, including a good description of differences between problem-based learning and project-based learning.
Okay, are the projects different from one year to the other, or do they continue the same project from first year to final year?
We always try to have the projects be different from one year to the other because, of course, if you have the same project every year, the students are simply going to ask the previous year's students what they did, and the work is not very original. We try to have these projects as often as possible respond to actual problems that somebody has suggested that the students could help with, and this could be a local organization, it could be local government, it could be someplace in the school. But if the problem is authentic and there's an opportunity for the work to actually be used, the students are more highly motivated, and they're not simply copying what they've found, but they're trying to do something a little bit more original. I think some of the examples that I'll give in a minute will give you an idea of what I'm talking about with that.
Can you suggest what are 2 or 3 major mindset changes that the faculty should have in order to implement PBL?
I actually have a slide about this later because that's a very important topic, so I'll defer that until just a little bit later.
How can we have multidisciplinary projects from second year onwards?
Well, I think that if we choose problems that are sufficiently authentic in the real world, the solutions tend to be multidisciplinary. The more complex the problem is, the more disciplines are required to solve the problem. Now, it depends on whether you're doing something that is very technical in the engineering world or if you're doing a problem which has more social and cultural aspects like some of the ones that I'll be talking about in a moment. But as long as you don't expect the technical content to be too sophisticated, I think it's really useful to have multidisciplinary projects early on so that students can learn to work with people who are bringing different types of expertise to the table. And everybody has something to contribute, but they have to learn to communicate with each other, and they have the opportunity, actually the necessity of educating each other about new topics. And this can be very helpful for them also.
So the next question has to do with the problem that we face in India, that with large classes. So what is the size of classes that you're dealing with?
Probably the largest class that I have done project-based learning with was about 100. And in this case, I had the students put into teams of 3, so we had 30-something teams, and I had some assistance, as I mentioned before, from some of these undergraduates who had completed the course already, so I didn't have to look over the details of every report draft, and I didn't have to meet with every team on a regular basis. But this is much better suited to smaller classes. That is absolutely true.
Do you use any instrument for assessing students' team functioning?
I typically am using some sort of a rubric where I explain to students how their teamwork will be evaluated, and we gather information from the students themselves by asking them to evaluate their teammates and also themselves, but not in a, but I found that the best way to do this is to have the students do it in a formative way so that they're giving feedback to each other about strengths and weaknesses, and then sharing this information in an open way so that they can later in the course demonstrate some improvement in these areas.
Okay, but yeah.
Another approach is also for students to identify their particular contributions to the project. So some sort of statement of authorship if there's a report. It really is necessary if you're going to have students working in a team and you want there to be individual accountability. I think it's necessary for someone, the professor or someone who's assisting the professor, to meet with these students from time to time and talk to them about what they're doing to understand who is making a contribution.
Okay, we'll take one more question before we continue the thing here, because there are a few more. But how would you compare what you're doing, your model, with one in Olin and the one in Denmark, Aalborg?
Those are both exceptionally good programs. I think we share a lot of ideas and a lot of the same principles with our colleagues at Olin, and the folks at Aalborg in Denmark have been leaders of this for many years. So those are programs that I admire. I know some of the people at Olin, and we communicate regularly. I think those are also other excellent examples of project-based curriculum.
Yeah, please go ahead, Rick.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to talk about some of the larger projects which our students do in the 3rd and 4th year. You may recall I said in the 3rd year they do a project we call the Interactive Qualifying Project, and this is 9 credit hours. It does not take the form of a course. Instead, you have a team of 3 or 4 students working, doing independent inquiry, I would say, under faculty direction. These students come from all different fields, so you might have on one team, you might have a computer scientist, a business student, a biochemist, and a civil engineer. And the faculty are also from all fields. These projects are very often advised by more than one faculty member, so the advisors might be an electrical engineer and an historian. And the students are solving an interdisciplinary problem that involves both society and technology. And most of these projects are sponsored by an external organization which presents the students with a problem that they actually want solved and will use the students' results if the students do a good job. We are mostly working with non-governmental organizations, government agencies, and non-profit organizations. The goals of this project, again, this is starting to become familiar to you maybe, mostly transferable skills. The skills of research and problem solving, critical thinking and communication, teamwork and leadership, and ethical awareness. The idea behind this project was that we feel it's really important for students of science and technology to understand the context of science and technology. In other words, what is the social setting of a problem, and what are the impacts on human beings of a technological solution. So a few examples. We work with an organization in our city called AIDS Project Worcester, where people have AIDS and HIV infection, and we work to improve community nutrition. The students worked with the organization to recommend how they could develop a community garden where the clients of AIDS Project Worcester would have the opportunity to grow nutritious vegetables for themselves in a city and an area where they often didn't have access to good fresh food. We do a lot of projects for our local city government in helping them with transportation planning and space planning. And we've done some projects on food justice, on how we can work with local organizations and local farmers to bring food into the communities where people are living on very low incomes. And this is with a local non-governmental organization called the Regional Environmental Council. Now you will notice that these projects don't really have a lot of technology or engineering content. That is the intention of this project. This is not supposed to be related to the students' major directly, but the students are using a lot of the approaches that they've learned from their training in engineering and science, because to do these projects well, they have to do a lot of research, they have to gather information, they have to analyze it. Sometimes they're using quantitative methods of analysis, but sometimes they're using qualitative methods of analysis. They have to develop recommendations, and they have to justify them with evidence and good arguments. They have to write reports and give presentations. This all prepares them to do another project, also 9 credit hours, in the 4th year, and this one is in their major field. So for engineers, this is the engineering design project that they will do that integrates much of the knowledge that they have across their 4 years. So you have teams of 1 to 4, typically from the same major. They might be a group of mechanical engineers working together or a group of chemical engineers working together, and sometimes you can have multidisciplinary teams as well. The faculty are from that same major, and they're tackling, in this case, a professional level engineering challenge. And many of these projects are problems that are presented by corporations, and sometimes those corporations provide a fee to the university in return, that helps us to support the program. And sometimes the students are doing projects through a professor's research laboratory. Again, many of the learning outcomes, the educational objectives, are transferable skills and abilities. How do you apply knowledge and skills? How do you solve problems? But in this case, it's very much applying the knowledge in the major and preparing them for whatever is going to come next. For some of them, it will be the engineering workplace. For some of them, it will be graduate school. Our students in civil engineering have worked with the state of Massachusetts to do water supply modeling for the local reservoir, which supplies drinking water for our city. We've had students work for the Gillette Company, which is in nearby Boston, Massachusetts, and manufactures razor blades, and the students developed designs for the machines that would create the razor blade cartridges. And we had environmental engineering students working up in Canada on sustainable landscape architecture. You can see pictured on the right is my colleague, Professor Al Hoffman, who is a mechanical engineer and an expert in rehabilitation engineering, and he is working with some students on an MQP related to the design of a special type of wheelchair for people with certain disabilities. We have established around the United States and around the world what we call project centers, where 70% of our students complete at least one project in a full-time immersion away from campus. We have these locations all around the world, but I think the important thing to be learned from this is that we are able to provide the students an opportunity to work on the projects full-time away from the campus. And we do this in international locations, but we also do it right here in our home city by having the students have some portion of the academic year where they're not taking any other courses and they can focus directly on those projects. The faculty advisors are still working with them and overseeing their work, but the students in this case are very often spending their day not on campus, but they're spending their day with that local sponsoring organization. So let me say a little bit about how this type of work can be evaluated. The faculty have to give the students feedback and be looking at their work. But one thing that is different, I think, from a traditional course is that the grades are not just on the results of the report and the device that they produce, but also on the process. Students are expected to follow a good teamwork process, to be conscientious, to treat each other well, to be putting in a steady effort, and so the faculty have to evaluate not just the results but also the process. We ask the students to evaluate their own learning and to evaluate the quality of the faculty advising. And we ask the sponsors, the organizations who pose these projects, to give us feedback on the usefulness of the student work, what we can do to improve the program. We do regular program assessment, where we have to show evidence that students are achieving the learning outcomes. That's what LOs mean here. And this is very important when we are getting accredited. So we look at the student written report and we look for evidence of the learning outcomes. And when we find areas where we're not doing very well, this provides us with the opportunity for training our faculty and giving them some support to improve. WPI has been consistently rated for the last 20 years or so among the top U.S. universities for alumni success as measured by salaries shortly after graduation and in the middle of their career. And so we wanted to investigate this a little bit, so we conducted an alumni study recently. We know that there are many universities around the world that are interested in project-based education and experiential education. And at this time, we have more than 40 years of experience and over 20,000 graduates of this project-based learning curriculum. So we hired an external evaluator to answer some of these research questions. What are the long-term impacts of the two big projects, the IQP and the MQP, on the careers and lives of our students? Does this project-based work prepare our alumni for success? And how do different groups experience this project work? We did a survey. I'll spare you some of these details. We did a survey of alumni, we interviewed alumni, and then we interviewed employers to ask, are the graduates of a project-based learning curriculum different, and how? Here are some of the things that we learned. Project work conveys many positive impacts to graduates. It gives them a wide range of professional abilities and skills, and I'll describe some of those, but it also gives them broader worldviews and personal growth. They become stronger people. Some alumni reported especially positive impacts. Women, this is very important for engineering education in the United States. Women are underrepresented in engineering in the U.S., and I'll show you some of what we learned about that. And those who completed the projects off campus, the projects which tend to be more authentic, where the students know that their work will be used. These projects were even more powerful than the others. The alumni told us very interesting stories, and the employers told us that project work itself is evidence of the skills and abilities that they seek. So when they know that a student has undergone project work, then they know that that student has a certain set of abilities and skills related to teamwork and problem solving and independent learning that they're looking for. Here are some of the results of the survey. So 89% of our alumni, for example, told us that those two big projects helped them develop responsibility for their own learning. Similarly, 89% said the projects helped them develop ideas, 88% solving problems, and you can read the rest of this. A lot of these are dealing with the professional skills and abilities that are going to help someone be successful in their career, in management, in leadership, in teamwork, in communication. So these were very satisfying to us. This told us that the projects were achieving much of what we had hoped that they would achieve for our alumni. And when we talked to them in the interviews, they told us that this success was due to the fact that the project work they did in our curriculum is very similar to the project work they do as engineers. One alumnus said project work is really a problem-solving and project management education, and that's something I use constantly at work. Another said, the project, it's close to what I do now. Life is projects. And then a third said, I think the projects just really mimic, at a very early age, how to work, how to be successful. And as I mentioned, we were very excited to learn that female alumni reported more positive impact in 36 out of 39 areas. And this is consistent with research which shows that women are more motivated than men by understanding how their work can help some other person and by collaborative work. This is a very important finding for institutions that are looking to attract and retain more women into the field of engineering. We found in talking to the alumni and analyzing the results of the study, the real-world aspect of the problem was highly motivational. When students know that a problem is authentic, it provides them with motivation and context, but the more authentic a problem is, the more complex and rich it is, and the more it requires students to draw on different fields and intellectual skills. Because the problems are real, they don't always go smoothly, and the alumni reported that this can be frustrating when you're a student, but later they understand, in hindsight, that the adversity they face, that the unpredictability of the projects is an asset. It promotes learning and growth and confidence. And they also told us that the projects were viewed as a safe environment to develop professional skills because they were working on something that felt authentic, but they had the advice and support of a faculty member. It wasn't like they had just gone into industry by themselves, so that it felt like a place where they could develop some professional skills in a way that if they stumble and fell, someone would help pick them up off the ground. So this is the slide that I had promised in response to one of the other questions. This really requires a certain type of culture change because the faculty have to move away from being the expert in the front of the room who is dispensing information and delivering facts to students, and we have to become coaches and facilitators. So this is much more like the way that faculty may work with their graduate students than the way that faculty often work with undergraduates. We are monitoring their inquiry, we are coaching and facilitating, but we're not telling them what to do. Similarly, for students, this is a change in their role. Instead of sitting there and listening and watching, they are challenged to create and discover. We need them to become independent, and instead of simply arriving into the classroom to gain knowledge, we send them out to try to make knowledge by gathering information and analyzing it and pulling it together in ways that maybe people have never done before. So this does require a culture change, and not all faculty are equally comfortable with this culture change. And so one of the things that we're finding working with other colleges and universities is that the move to project-based learning is best begun by working with those faculty who find this idea exciting and inviting and want to do this. I would never recommend that a college instantly begin to just decree that all faculty are going to start doing project-based learning. The best way to begin, I believe, is by starting with a group of enthusiastic faculty who are eager to learn this and let them do it on a pilot basis and learn from the experience, do some evaluation, and see what happens. One of the big differences, as I mentioned, is that student work is being evaluated in a fundamentally different way. Rather than simply marking an exam and giving a certain number of points for certain answers, we have to evaluate both results and process. Obviously, students have to do careful research, valid analysis, they have to develop good reports and effective solutions, but we also need to find ways to evaluate their process. How steady is their effort? How appropriate are their interactions? How effective is their communication? Are they being timely and meeting deadlines? Are they being professional and working well with other people? So this requires maybe a different toolkit for faculty and some different approaches. Here are some things that we've learned from over 40 years of project-based learning at our university. This type of learning can change student culture. Obviously, the students are developing a broader set of skills and are very well prepared for the workforce, but they also develop a different mindset. They feel that they can make a difference. They're very entrepreneurial and enthusiastic, and as I showed you, they can be very successful in their career. This also has changed the faculty culture. All of our faculty are involved in project-based learning, and they become quite proud of it. It's become a signature program for our university, and it really can help quite a bit when you're trying to do something challenging to have all of your coworkers sitting beside you and enthusiastically helping. We develop many good community partners and academic partners because we're working with organizations outside of the university, and these partnerships very often bring us mutual benefits. The organizations our students do projects for benefit from the student work, but we benefit from the opportunities they provide the students. We're able to do some very good fundraising. We find that our successful alumni are very eager to donate to keep the project program growing, and it's helped our reputation. This is the thing that WPI is best known for. So finally, a little bit of advice if you're going to get started with project-based learning. I would say start small. As I said, start with the faculty who are enthusiastic. Maybe start with one course or even one assignment within a course. I would never require somebody to get involved with this when it's first becoming started. And you need to recognize that you're asking faculty to develop new ideas and approaches, and this requires time. So I think that faculty need to be supported and rewarded for being brave enough to try something new in their classroom. It's very important to explain to students why you're asking them to do this new and sometimes unfamiliar and scary type of learning. And the best way to explain is really to talk about the benefits that they will reap, the learning outcomes that they will gain, the professional skills, the fact that they're learning things that the employers who might hire them want them to learn. And be sure to evaluate the results of any pilot or experiment that you do so that you can identify what's working well and keep it, and so that you can identify what's not working so well and improve upon it. And whatever you do, be sure to celebrate the stuff that goes well. Celebrate the accomplishments of the students, but also make sure that the administrators celebrate the accomplishments of the brave faculty who are getting involved in project-based learning. So at that point, that ends my, my formal presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions in the remaining time we have.
Okay, fantastic. Professor Rick Wes, we are, I think, exciting, stimulating, and many other words I can use. Let me quickly go to the chat sessions. People have been sending a few questions. Let's continue to send a few questions because we have about 8 or 9 minutes left. So this is great that we have saved a little time for interaction. So let us get on with it. So keep it coming. All right. So okay, let's see what we have. Groups for any activities, should they be formed depending on the skills of the students or any other criteria that we have to consider?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are many different philosophies that you can take in forming student groups. I believe that the best approach is the approach which is going to maximize student learning. So this often means choosing students who have very different strengths and abilities, and choosing students who are going to have to teach each other the things that they already know. One of the important questions to ask yourself is, if you're going to have a team of students taking on a task, do you want each student to do what he or she is already good at? Or do you want each student to be challenged to do the part of the project that is new and unfamiliar to them? And that's a conversation that you have to have with the students. And if you really want students to get out of their comfort zone and work on the parts of the project which are not familiar to them, then you need to design the project accordingly. You need to have this conversation with the students. You need to be sure that somebody is monitoring the individual contributions of each student. Maybe it's important that each student is doing some technical design and each student is doing some amount of technical writing. There is an online excuse me, there is an online program or an online system from Purdue University which is called CATME, C-A-T-M-E. And I want to highly recommend that you take a look at this free online resource which is designed to help faculty form student teams. The CATME system allows your students to enter information about themselves. They can enter information about their background, their academic performance, their interests, their characteristics, when they're available to work, where they live, whatever information you want, their gender, and then you, the professor, can enter in the criteria that you want to use to form the teams. Do you want teams that have similar academic backgrounds or different academic backgrounds? Do you want teams that have the same gender or mixed genders? Do you want teams of students who are available to meet at similar times? And whatever your criteria are, the CATME program will take these criteria and it will do an optimal sorting of the students into teams. And I know a lot of people that have used this and they're all very happy with it. Again, it's C-A-T-M-E from Purdue.
Okay, related to that, are students assigned specific roles or will they decide among themselves what component will be done by each of them?
I have seen both of these techniques work very effectively. I have colleagues in mechanical engineering that will have teams of 3 where one student is the organizational project manager, one student is the technical manager, and one student is the communication manager, and they are taking those primary roles, where the technical person is doing more of the design, and the operationals person is doing more of the scheduling and making sure that deadlines are being met, and the communication person is overseeing the development of reports and other communications. I have very often allowed students to organize themselves however they like, but then require them to rotate the roles in a certain way. So to give you an example, I meet with my student teams every week, and each week a different person has to run the meeting. So each week a different student has to be the chair of the meeting, who prepares the agenda, sends it out ahead of time, who orchestrates the meeting, and who sends out the minutes afterwards. So there are many different approaches, and I would recommend that you think about your educational objectives and try something and evaluate it, and if you don't like it, try something different. I haven't seen any research that shows that one of these methods is better than the other.
A couple of questions. Requests for sharing the rubrics that you talked about earlier, I think, about the team, so one of the topics that you mentioned.
Yes, I would be happy to do that. I will
email it to me and I'll share it.
I will send those to Krishna, and he can send that out.
A couple of questions on mathematics. How do you integrate mathematics into these project-based learning activities?
Well, obviously engineering involves the application of mathematics. So the projects that I have done in the realm of engineering, the students have to do a certain amount of mathematics, and that mathematics has to be explained in their written report. I do have colleagues in our Department of Mathematics who give students project work in the context of a mathematics course, in a statistics course, or a differential equations course, or a calculus course. I believe that if you go online looking for examples of projects in mathematics courses, you'll be able to find some examples. Very often our students are doing mathematical modeling, for example, that can be helpful to external organizations. I know a lot of our mathematics majors do industrial mathematics projects that help local corporations.
Can you elaborate on the use of alumni for the project-based learning that you said that you've been using?
Well, the alumni, having gone through the project-based learning, are very enthusiastic about it. So many of these alumni come back to us now working at a corporation, and they say, I would like to offer projects because I would like to work with some students. So many of the project sponsors in the local corporations who are offering us project opportunities are in fact our alumni. When we have student project presentations on campus, we invite alumni to come and judge the student projects, and we find that the alumni love interacting with students, and they will very often come back and they donate their time. They provide an audience, which is very motivating to the students, and it also helps keep the alumni connected to the university, so this helps. And in some cases, these alumni have very generously donated their money to the university to help us further the project program. I mentioned our first year projects. That was started by a very generous gift from an alumnus who wanted to see that happen.
Couple of questions, two questions, and then we'll end. One question is, does WPI, do you have any other curriculum, or is it just project-based curriculum? Either you have more traditional?
We have no other curriculum. All of our undergraduate students complete the project-based curriculum.
Okay, then the next question is, if there were colleges in India that were wanting to get more serious about project-based learning, do you have any documentation available at Worcester on your rollout or on your project-based experience? I think you mentioned some workshops that you conduct. Maybe that's what you might talk a little bit about.
So there is a URL on the screen right now, which is the homepage of our Center for Project-Based Learning. So this center has just begun, and to date, the two primary activities of the center are as follows. We have a summer institute where teams of faculty from different colleges and universities around the world can come to WPI for 3 days in the summer for an intensive workshop. And we have actually had a team from India attend our 2015 institute, a team from VIT in Vellore. Another thing that we are able to do is to develop and deliver custom workshops on other campuses. There is, of course, a fee for this, but if you are interested in finding out how you can work with our center, I would encourage you to visit the website that you see on the screen right now, and you can send us an inquiry through that website, and we can communicate.
Right. I think we've run out of time, and we've also had some outstanding discussion after the presentation. So this has really been extremely useful. Rick, thank you so much for taking the time at 6 in the morning. I know you have come to your office to make this presentation. So we really thank you for your dedication and willingness to do this. And with that, I say thank you on behalf of the 100 plus that have been part of this program today, and maybe many more who have been in rooms listening to the books, to the seminar.